What's up, guys, and welcome to Tnashi's Movie Corner. So for today's video, I thought we'd continue to discuss Civil War. Why? Well, because it's popular right now, sure. Because I wasn't quite sure where to go with my next review. Yeah, maybe. But there's been so much talk about it that I thought it would be a good thing to continue the conversation. So let's get into one of the things that came up with this movie is that, you know, it made a whole lot of money opening weekend, right? Broke records, everything else. But some were a little disappointed by the amount of money it made because they were like, well, we expected it to be like 200 million, and it wasn't. It was more like 180, somewhere around 180, right? And so they were like, well, that's a disappointment because it just didn't meet the expectations that we had on it, or what have you. And there's some blame going around for it being on Batman v Superman. And they were like, well, look, a lot of people didn't like Batman v Superman. You know, they thought it was a bad movie, and they became uninterested with this movie. Now, others have claimed that the way it's going is it's kind of becoming superhero fatigue or whatever, and then some people are saying, well, no, because look at Deadpool, it broke all kinds of records and what have you in February, so it can't be that. Well, so I thought this would be a good point to discuss some of the things with this movie, which, by the way, as of right now, as far as I know, it is still number one for this past weekend. So it's still doing really good. I mean, it just is. As it stands right now, it looks like it's had about a 59% drop off, bringing in an estimated $72.6 million in the US, but globally it's now has a total of $940.9 million. So it's definitely going to end up crossing, you know, that billion. It's going to reach that billion mark pretty soon. So, again, this is one of those things where even the drop off isn't quite as bad, I think, as Batman v Superman. It's pretty close though, but I don't think it's quite as bad as Batman v Superman. I'd have to go back and look, but it's a significant drop off, at least domestically, right? So yeah. Anyway, when it comes to this movie, though, there's been a lot of blame on Batman v Superman because they're like, oh well, Batman v Superman didn't do very good, or whatever. Had a huge drop off, you know, kind of lagged out, what have you. People saw that movie, they got tired of that movie, kind of wore them down, the casual fan, and so they didn't want to see this movie, so they didn't show up for this movie. The problem I have with that is that people did show up for this movie. Yeah, not as many as you were thinking, but a lot of people still showed up from this movie. The MCU has built itself over 12 movies leading into this one. And you're telling me one movie would drive people away? I don't know. I mean, even Age of Ultron had kind of mixed reviews, you know, going into it. Iron Man 3 had mixed reviews going into it. You know, The Winter Soldier was great, but The War of the Dark World wasn't as good as what people were hoping for. So you do have that. There is one thing you can say, though. Batman, there's been a lot of superheroes fighting each other. Batman fighting Superman. Daredevil fighting Punisher. If you go the animated route, you got Justice League versus Teen Titans. Go check out that review, by the way. And now you have Captain America Civil War, which is, you know, the Avengers 2.5, basically the movie. But you got the Avengers fighting each other, right? The other thing too, though, is Avengers is not in the title, so maybe some people could have been confused by the Captain America part of the movie if people weren't, that big on Captain America to begin with. For a third movie in a Captain America film, though, it broke all kinds of records. It's still breaking all kinds of records right now. The international box office looks great as far as this movie is concerned. So I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of people want to throw Batman v Superman in. And I'm sure there's some people that saw Batman v Superman were disappointed, or even if they liked it and they saw this movie come out and they're like, well, wait a minute, I just saw a movie like that. I don't want to see another one. Or, man, I just saw a movie like that and it wasn't good, so I don't want to see this one. But I don't think that would take out a huge chunk of what this movie would get. And I think there's a lot of overlooking here on just how well this movie is doing. This movie is doing, it was doing really well. 59% drop, if that holds. This is all based on what I'm seeing on Collider. So if that does hold, though, that's quite a drop. That is very close to Batman v Superman dropping. So yeah, that's something. But at the same time, it's domestic. So it looks like, it's definitely doing better internationally than what Batman v Superman did, because they didn't cross 700 million worldwide until a little bit in April. So it's, yeah, I don't think they even reached the billion mark, but there's definitely that for it. Going into another part of it that I thought I'd talk about is I've linked up in my spoiler review. I talked about the similarities, structural similarities between the movies, and that they are there. And I feel like there's a lot of hate for one movie for doing it, but then the other movie does it, and it's like, no, it's not that bad. I feel you're being very hypocritical here. If you judge one for this, you should judge the other one for that as well. You should take into accord both, same treatment for both movies. So I feel like it's kind of unwarranted in my opinion. It's just not right for them to do that. But that being said, one of the things I will say, the universe as a whole does contain a lot of humor. The MCU does contain a lot of humor. And a lot of times you have great character development for the heroes, and that's really cool. But you don't have it for the villains. So I'm very curious when we get Thanos, when he finally shows up, if he's going to give us another good villain. Because they're severely lacking in the villain department right now. You had Abomination, which I thought had quite potential. So I actually like Abomination. So we'll get that. But he still doesn't stand out. No one really remembers him. But for me, I think he worked pretty well. You have Red Skull, who was, again, potential there, but he wasn't in the movie very long, and he's gone. You have Ultron, who a lot of people said was a big miss. Winter Soldier wasn't really a villain, so that doesn't really count. You have Loki, who is the villain, right? So one villain everyone can agree on enjoying. Then you have a few here and there. The Mandarin, which had such potential, but they squandered it. And they try to redeem it a little bit with fans in a short, and it just doesn't work. Partly because I don't think they're ever going to go into it. Partly because they threw it in there as kind of a way to redeem themselves, and you can see that clearly. So it doesn't really work for me. So yeah, you have that. You have Malekith from the Dark World, which nobody cares. Nobody remembers. he didn't have very big of a presence for the movie at all, and definitely not for the MCU as a whole. I love Guardians of the Galaxy, but you had Ronan, and again, the character that people don't really care about. People just don't care about that character. Now, I liked Nebula, but I may be one of the few people that liked her and sees the potential for her. But, it's just the MCU has been very lackluster on villains. Whiplash, I can't even remember Jeff Bridges' character in Iron Man. Again, was okay, I guess. No, he was bad, so it wasn't like any surprise or what have you. There's just not many. There's not MCU characters. The heroes are great, but the villains kind of suck. The villains just aren't good villains. And I think we're definitely getting to the point where that has to change. That it can't continue being the same way as it has been. Especially with Thanos. If Thanos shows up and is a complete, just again, lackluster villain, is what we got with all the others after building him up since the first Avengers, teasing him. I think people will really harp on this universe with that happening. They've been getting by so far, even though it's been a common flaw in about all the films. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, we'll forgive it, but you gotta change that at some point. You've got to address that. You've got to make that better. And that's something I know they can do. It's just a matter of will they do it. And I think that at least the writers acknowledge that that's not the big selling point in their movies. That's not something that they've done too well so far. Another thing that is going to be interesting is how these next movies are going to play out. You have Doctor Strange, you've got Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, you've got Thor Ragnarok. I believe there's an Ant-Man and Wasp, or the Ant-Man and the Wasp, or however they titled it. I believe that one's in there. And after the events of Civil War, I feel like that'll be interesting to see how things go about. Because I'm not sure. I'm not sure how they're going to connect it in that way. And the other movies don't really connect to it at all. So that's very interesting. But, it's definitely going to be something to see how they bring about Infinity War Part 1, how the events from this movie played out in the course of these movies. If they affect it at all, they're obviously not going to affect Guardians. I doubt it's going to have any effect on Thor. I don't think they'd bring it up in Doctor Strange. So it's kind of a weird point to be like, okay, here's this episode, right? And we're going to end it right here, and then we're not going to bring it up again. But who knows? I mean, maybe they will tie it in some way. I'm not sure when the Spider-Man movie's coming. So, there could always be something else of relevance to tie it in. And Spider-Man, we do know Spider-Man has Iron Man in it. So at least it's going to have something play over, I'm sure. Going with another thing for Civil War, one of the things I said was so disappointing was Zemo. And I said that because I was talking about the arc that they gave his character in the movie, not from what he is as a character, as a villain within the comics, because I feel like it's such a huge departure from his character. And I'm not just talking about the purple outfit that he wears, right, with the mask and everything. But I'm talking about just how big of a villain he is. And I'm not the biggest Captain America fan, so it's not one of those things where I've read a lot But it always comes down to, in my mind, is that Red Skull is Captain America's ultimate, arch enemy, right? His ultimate nemesis, like the Joker to Batman. Red Skull is that for Captain America. And in the first movie, of course, the way they end it is we don't know. Is he dead? Is he alive? Is he coming back? Who knows? I have no idea. But then underneath him, again, just from me, is Baron Zemo. He's like the other ultimate villain for Captain America. And he's not always a villain, to be fair. He hasn't always been a villain. But when he is a villain, he's such a great adversary for Cap. And this movie didn't capture anything with that. I mean, this movie just had him going after the Avengers, not strictly Captain. Certainly not Captain. Going after the entire Avengers and the means of which he goes and tries to give them to fight each other or what have you. And the fact that he doesn't seem to have, the thing is, in the comics, he is a brilliant sword fighter, right? It's something he always has with him, as he's very good at fencing or what have you. And he first showed up in the Avengers number 4, to be fair, for the comics. So I don't know. It's just one of those things where it's like this movie wasted potential with Crossbones, who was built up over the course of Winter Soldier. He had quite the character arc to him. And then we get him established or whatever. We know he's going to play a role in future events. And then his role is so minor and unnecessary. And then he's gone. I was like, oh well. And then you have Zemo come in, which granted, Zemo is still alive at the end of this, right? He's still alive. But he's such a different character. And he doesn't have any form of presence that his character, he doesn't have any really of the essence of the character from the comics. So why bother giving him the name? I mean, and I could be missing something, certainly. But just from what I've seen of the character, he just doesn't retain anything. I mean, he doesn't even work for Hydra, as far as I know. So, at least from what I remember, I don't know. He doesn't work for me. And that's the thing with the MCU villains, is they don't work. And along with them not working, there's other issues too with the whole there's no stakes, because it's like, well, Coulson didn't really die, and Coulson wasn't a major character anyway. And then you had where it's like, oh, well, Quicksilver died, but not only was his death kind of odd in execution, but it's like, well, we just got to know this guy, so it doesn't mean anything when he dies. I don't feel anything for it. And they were acting like Hawkeye. They were suggesting that Hawkeye might die, and they were establishing his family and everything to happen. And again, for that movie, it'd make you feel a little, but overall, don't care. Do not care. So, none of these movies have any real sense of stakes to them. So, and that's one of the biggest issues I think I had with Civil War, is besides the title, which, again, a title is a title is a title, they're just using that as some sense of marketing. And they pull some stuff that I'm like, okay, cool, but that's not ultimately what leads them to fight each other or what have you, because Zemo's whole thing, and which I don't agree with. But the other thing is, it's like, well, they're fighting each other, but they're not trying to kill each other. At least not then. To be fair, later scene, there is definitely some stakes involved. And then ultimately it's disregarded at the end of the film, because there's no lasting effects that it really has. So, I don't know. It is what it is, I guess. Hopefully they can do better. Hopefully Thanos is better. I'm really looking forward to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. The first one is brilliant. It's one of my favorite MCU films. I'm not sure if they're going to bother to do any more Iron Man movies. He may be more like a Hulk thing, where they put him in to other films just to have him in there, because he's definitely going to be in the Spider-Man film, so I think that's what they're doing with him there, and then of course Infinity War or what have you, which is interesting to know whether or not Spider-Man will be in Infinity War, given how he was treated in this movie, where he was just kind of told to go home after a certain point, and how much he will or will not progress from now until then. So that would be interesting to see, for sure. The thing is about the Hulk, and I've had a few people mention this, so I thought I'd go ahead and say, Universal still owns the rights to a standalone Hulk film. The Hulk film that is part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is under Universal. That was before Disney ended up buying Marvel. So, just for the record, Marvel Disney now cannot do a standalone Hulk film. That's why he's been tied into the Avengers Age of Ultron, while he'll be in Thor Ragnarok, is because they can't do a standalone film. That doesn't mean that they can't come up with a deal. Universal and Marvel can't strike up a deal, because Universal certainly can't do anything with the character either, so it's just kind of in limbo right now. But that being said, should there be another Hulk film? That's hard to say, because a lot of fans, rather, are like, yes, absolutely, do Planet Hulk. That's an awesome comic series. Draw from that, do that movie, get it done now. And while I agree, I enjoy that series very much so, and I would look forward to seeing it. The Ang Lee Hulk did not do so well. Critically, did not do so well with its release as far as box office, and by the audience either. And then you had the Incredible Hulk show up, which I think did do better critically, but the box office certainly wasn't there. Didn't make a lot of money. Now, it was the second movie, I believe, to come out of the gate after Iron Man, so it's a very odd choice to go with Hulk, but the fact of the matter is, it didn't make any money. You know? So it's one of those things where it's like, man, I do want to see this movie. I want to see Planet Hulk. I do. But will we see it? It's too soon to tell. It's too soon. We're going to get Captain Marvel. We're going to get, like I said, Doctor Strange, Thor Ragnarok, Spider-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. It looks like we might get Black Widow at some point. You're going to get Black Panther, certainly. I'm not sure where that takes place. You're getting Ant-Man and the Wasp. So you're getting a lot of movies. And Thor may be down the line. But it's going to be a while for those rights to go up. I'm not sure how long, but it's going to be a while. And it might be even longer after that, just because the first two movies, one's not part of the cinematic universe, but the first two movies that were tried to do with the Hulk just weren't received that well. So who knows with that. But anyway, and I thought I'd talk about, I'll try to be a little quicker because I've gone on quite a bit. But going into the lineup, the lineup of the Avengers for Infinity War, I think you're going to see everyone that we've seen in the movies, but you're not going to get any pulls from the TV series. Those are separate things. They're not going to pull them in at all. Those are more grounded. And to be honest, even those are subtle references here or there to let you know that they do kind of tie in, that Jessica Jones and Daredevil do kind of tie in. It's hard to do a theatrical version of those characters to where they're no longer restricted and then dial it back down to the budget that you have for these shows, and it would feel quite disjointing to do that. So I don't see them doing that at all. And I'll be super honest, like, it's going to be real interesting how Thanos works out, because I can imagine everyone's not going to be able to fight him. Like, what is Black Widow going to do to Thanos? I have nothing. I can't think of anything she could even remotely do. Like, Scarlet Witch has power, Hulk has power, Thor has power, Iron Man, he has something. Cap at least has the formula or whatever running through him, so he's strong. Winter Soldier has the same type of thing. Like, she has nothing. And Hawkeye, he at least has arrows, although Hawkeye gets kind of thrown under the bus, so to speak, in these films as being like he's the weakest when he shouldn't be considered the weakest in my eyes. So I'm not really sure how that works. But I almost wonder if Thanos isn't just going to bring down an army, and you're going to see some of them fight the army, and you're going to see some of them actually fight him. Because I don't think everyone could stand up to him or do anything to him in some aspects. So I don't know. That would be interesting. An interesting thing to play out. But then, of course, after the Infinity Wars, which, by the way, they're like a subtitle, I think there's going to be another title with that. But aside from that, after those movies are over, are you going to have characters actually die in this battle with Thanos? And if you do, who's going to be the new Avengers lineup? Because they're all going to group it together. They're all going to fight. Who's going to be left standing? Where are the films going to go from there? There's a lot of contracts that go up. They're up in the air with these movies being over. So I don't know. That's kind of a interesting thing to debate on, I think, and say I would hope they're not going to get rid of any of the newer characters that were just being introduced to. But they may have, whether they kill them or have them retire, they may have some older characters kind of leave, at least for a while. But again, who knows? Who knows how that works? And with the MCU, does Loki play any part of Ragnarok? Does Loki play any part in Thanos? Because we know at the end of Thor: The Dark World, he's taken over as Odin. He's pretending to be Odin right now. So we don't know where Odin is. So that's another interesting question that still has to be answered, that wasn't answered. So yeah, I mean, MCU, it's still doing good. It's still doing really good. And I think for people being like, oh, well, it's not making as much as we thought. So, Jurassic World Fury 7 made butt-ton more than what we thought. So, it goes both ways. Movies can do far better than we thought. I mean, Deadpool did far better than people thought it would. It's just the way it works sometimes. So, I don't see this being a problem right now. Wait till Doctor Strange comes and then come and tell me that we're still in trouble. Wait until the rest of the superhero genre comes out and then tell me that we're in trouble. There's a lot of superhero movies coming out this year, so it could be fatigue on the casual audience already, because we've already had 3 and we're gonna have 4 coming in like 2 weeks. So I don't know. I don't see it being that big of a problem. But anyway, that's my thoughts on at least some of the stuff for the MCU. I tried to cover quite a bit. yeah, going on 30 minutes, so I'm going to wrap this up. Hopefully you enjoyed this vid. Click that like button, share, subscribe to my channel, watch my other vids, and yeah, just keep doing what you're doing. I really appreciate it. Thanks, and until next time, peace.